make those bets. Make sure that you're not gonna go out of business because you lost that bet. You don't have to be 100% under control of everything 100% of the time, because if you are, you probably won't scale as fast.
Mic check.
I'm good.
Mic check. Mic check.
You can read about success all day long, but if you don't put in the work, the mindset, execution, and the hustle behind your vision, it just remains a dream.
When everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility.
We uncover what high-level entrepreneurs, business owners do to rise up from hustling daily.
So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances.
The world becomes your library to help you to become better at your craft.
Join me as I share with you actionable tips to help you grow your business, learn skills, and help you level up in your self-development journey.
Your number one spot for business and personal growth is the Online Hustlers Podcast with your host, Esteban Andrade.
Every day I'm hustling.
What's going on, everyone that is in this episode of the Online Hustlers Podcast for the real estate marketing and conversion episodes that we have. And today we're bringing in a special guest from a disruptive tech company in Latin America. I believe this company is currently based on Colombia and Mexico. The two co-founders are very interesting people to actually read about them, and get to know them. Today we have one of the founding members of the first team that has started this company that is changing the game in Latin America in the tech industry. So this is real estate tech, prop tech, and ultimately, if you ever have noticed, USA is full of data, has amazing data. You can find a house, you can skip trace someone, you can ultimately know the owner of that person, find the phone numbers, find email, everything. But in Latin America and other countries around the world, data is something that is lacking. So right now we have one person that will be able to tell us the entire story of this disruptive company that is changing the game of Latin America and essentially creating, if I were to say it, essentially creating the next Zillow of Latin America. So I'm excited here to have Juan. And I'm sorry if I butcher your last name, man. I know that it's a Eastern European last name, right? Sokoloff, Juan Sokoloff.
That's perfect. You didn't butcher it, at least not more than I do in my daily life.
Awesome. So Juan is currently he's one of the founding members. So essentially, he was there ever since the growth. And the two co-founders, Breen and Sebastian, they were not able to come. But Sebastian is the one and only data vice president of data, right? Is that correct? That's your current role in the company, right?
Correct. I'm the vice president of data analytics and everything related to pricing in the company.
Awesome. So the company is called Habi.co. So Habi.co, hey man, I'd love for you to ultimately tell us more about you being in the founding team. Who were you before? Like, what were you doing before the founding team, like being part of Habi.co? Tell us a little bit more about your story and ultimately how you got to be part of the founding team of Habi.co.
Sure. So, Esteban, first of all, thanks for the invitation. Awesome being here. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So, I'm an economist, at least at what I did in my university. And the first thing that I was passionate about was urban economics. And urban economics basically tries to answer the question about why people and firms locate wherever they locate. And this very quickly takes you to trying to understand cities and why cities are formed and how they grow and how they transform. So I very quickly started working with the city of Bogota, and I helped the planning department try to understand dynamics. But something that I didn't really like about that job is that a lot of very smart people were using data to justify their decisions. I mean, they were very smart people, but the way in which they were using data was, this is my idea and I need to find some facts so that my idea is proved correct. And I didn't really like that approach, and I thought to myself, if I really want to improve cities in the world, I need to understand how can you use data to transform them, and how can you make better decisions based on data. That took me very quickly to get a master's degree in applied data science from NYU. And seeing all the potential that I saw in Latin America, I quickly went back to Colombia. As soon as I finished my master's, I went back to Colombia and I started a consulting firm, which basically helped some of the biggest housing developers in the country make better decisions about their projects, about the projects they were making, based on all the public data that was available and I knew from my time in the planning department. Doing this, I met Sebastian and Bryn with an amazing opportunity in transforming from the private sector the way in which the housing was sold and bought in Colombia. So I took this chance. I thought it was a very interesting opportunity, and I started, since the founding of the company, as you said, trying to figure out how with data we could transform and help people in the biggest financial decision of their lives, which is buying and selling a house.
So essentially, you saw that there was a big gap in Latin America where people are not able to truly utilize data for the real estate space to be able to buy a house, sell a house, even rent a house according to data. According to, like, for example, if we were to compare this to North America, there's Zillow that ultimately takes data that will use an algorithm and as estimate to know what's the potential price of the house once it's fixed up and sold according to the comparables around that area. But there's nothing like that in Latin America. I don't think there is anything like that in Colombia. I don't think there's anything like that in Mexico. So is that kind of like the founding team saw as kind of like the goal, or the vision was to help people buy and sell houses, or ultimately being able to get a better house, better pricing, or help real estate investors to be able to find properties? Like, what was entire mission? What is the entire mission of Habi.co?
Let's say that, and this is a bit anecdotal, but when Bryn, one of the one of the co-founders of the company, moved to Colombia, she's an American, she moved to Colombia, and she was trying to find a place to live, right? And very quickly, she realized that finding good financing was very difficult, that dealing with brokers was extremely hard, and that the market was highly opaque. And whenever she wanted to make a decision, it was extremely hard because there was no information for her to make a decision. In the end, if you ask me, more than Zillow, we're trying to make something resembling the MLS. And well, as maybe all of you know, the MLS is the multiple listing service. And probably the MLS is the foundation of most of the proptechs that exist in the United States. Even Zillow, I mean, creating a estimate is based on good data from the MLS. Mm-hmm. And the MLS conjures both pretty accurate information about pricing, but also a very trustable network of brokers. So what Habi is aiming for, I would say, is becoming that MLS while developing some of the monetizing products that you could potentially develop if you were the MLS. So if you were the MLS, you could be a Zillow, but you could also be an open door. And what we're trying to do in terms of the basis of all of it is construct all the technology and information that is needed so that we have an MLS and can potentially develop all of the monetizing businesses that come out of it.
Wow. Okay, that's really interesting because the MLS here is used by everyone. Real estate investors use it. They partner up with real estate agents that have access to it. Real estate agents use it all the time to send out notifications to their clients and ultimately be able to list the property when it's time to sell it, or just to buy it as well. So if when you go into Colombia and Mexico and there is a lack of data, there's a lack of resources to know, hey, what is this apartment cost, or what is this apartment just recently sold for, or this house right here? Like, what do you guys? How was the initial approach on trying to understand that data, or just start scraping that data, like recouping that data in a place where ultimately you can know what one neighborhood or one place um, median home price is like? How are you doing all that?
Yeah. So as you may know, our starting um, business, if you can call it that way, it was being an iBuyer. So we are an iBuyer. We are essentially an iBuyer. And as you might have heard from recent news, if you're an iBuyer and you don't price correctly, you go broke, right? You can see the Q3 results from Open Door. You can see 2021 results from Zillow, and basically the question of pricing when you're an iBuyer is perhaps the most important question of them all. And as you say, there was no data. So from the beginning, we had to address this issue because it was a survival kind of issue for the company. And we very quickly developed five strategies. The first strategy was gathering data operationally. A lot of transactions in Colombia, and I would say also in Mexico, are not done online and are not listed online. People are selling with a window listing. This is my phone number and I'm selling my property, call me. So we very quickly deployed people on the streets to gather up all of the information from the people who were selling. So we had an operational strategy. We also had, I would say, yeah, tech kind of strategy in which we developed scrapers and everything we could to gather all of the data that was online and or in other tech companies. We had a third strategy, which was building alliances with institutions that had siloed data. So there were broker guilds. So we went to these broker guilds and we started very quickly talking to them and seeing what type of data they had, so we could bring it over. We also purchased data. There were data providers. We purchased data, and finally, we made sure that each of our products helped us gather more data. So whenever we sold a property, of course, we made sure that we were gathering all of the data of the operation. And bringing all of this data together from all of these five different strategies, we were able to answer two questions. First of all, and also with the help of traditional valuation firms, how do you build a valuation? And then with the closing prices we had, we were able to drive conclusions from what was the difference from a traditional valuation result and the actual closing price. So combining these two points of information, we're able to do some pricing. And when I say some pricing, what I mean by this is we specialized in some sort of housing that was highly homogeneous and that was easily priceable. And only through the years, we have been expanding our capabilities into pricing other sort of properties. And this is quite frankly similar to what Open Door has done. They started in Phoenix, where 80% of the houses were built by the same five guys. And of course, it is easier to do when you're in a homogeneous type of environment. So that's where we started. And from there, we have been moving to pricing and dealing with more complex and heterogeneous type of markets.
Okay. So you started as an iBuyer, which is essentially you started acquiring in bulk, property in bulk, something like that.
Singular properties, bulk, bulk. The type of bulk businesses in Latin America are very hard to find. There's not a people who have bulk of properties to be sold. So we bought single properties from single families
Yeah.
that needed liquidity, basically.
So advertising a lot. I saw a lot of Facebook advertising and Google advertising while I was there, maybe a year ago or maybe a year and a half, and ultimately getting to buy these properties, right? And I guess buying it in not in the bulk, but like being able to buy as many as possible from motivated homeowners. That's what we're talking about, right? All right. So when you were buying this and you knew that you were going to be, transform into a tech company, or it just so happened that the best idea was to like, okay, we're gonna make it a tech company. Like, what was the thought process there?
From the beginning, we knew that if we wanted to make this business the size that we wanted to make it, we had to use technology. Um, I mean, flipping houses is not something new. Flipping houses is something that's been done uh, for thousands of years. Um, but usually, people who flip houses in Latin America are able to do it maybe 5 or 10 times a month. And the reason is that they don't have the data or the technology to make it scalable. We knew that if we wanted to make this a huge business, as we're doing, we needed the data, we needed the technology, we needed to build this MLS that we were trying to build. So that was from the beginning.
In the very beginning. All right. So the model started, you not necessarily, I mean, you guys were flipping houses as an iBuyer starts in that basic level concept.
Correct.
All right. And now gathering the data, and like the first stages of like really understanding neighborhoods, different, places around the city, let's say Bogota. Like, how was that done? Because I find it interesting that you had so many sources that were purchased. Some of them were like scraped and things like that. But there must be something interesting out there that in order for you to gather that data. Like, can you give me examples of like the way that you scrape on your team scrape data from properties that are being sold around the area or things like that?
So let me explain to you a little bit about the process of how we open a zone in a city, because I think that's gonna probably explain all of it.
100%.
So let's say we're dealing with Bogota. Whenever we say we open a city, we don't actually open the whole city. What we actually do is if we divide the city in hundreds of little pieces. And when I mean hundreds, I think Bogota has something around 150 subdivisions. Mexico City has something like 450 subdivisions. Um, and what we do is we open zone by zone,
Mm.
and we only open one zone once we know we have enough comps of enough quality in order to actually do pricing. And do we do that? We compare the characteristics of the market, of what the market is, and that usually we bring from cadastral data or public data in which we know what are the types of property in the area. And then we're able to know how many high quality comps we have in the area.
Mhm.
Because we have brought comps from several sources, but then you have to clean them, and then you have to realize that you have enough comps in order to start making precise pricing in that zone. And a zone is only opened once we are sure that we have enough data to start working on it. And then it is a process of analyzing zone by zone and making sure that if you're missing at least 10 observations in this zone to make sure that you have comps, then sending more people to go there and look at the window listings and focus your scraping efforts in gathering data from that zone, so that you can eventually open it. And that's the process of opening cities and opening markets.
Wow. Okay. So you essentially would send people looking at the beginning. I'm assuming. Are you still doing it that way, or like has evolved? Where like you go to a zone, see, you start looking at. I guess it's this place is being sold, and then you ultimately do research in that place, right? Is that something you guys still currently do to open up new zones?
Well, of course, now it's a lot more efficient. We have found ways to make it more automated and make decisions faster. But in the end, the essential process is the same. You have a zone. You know that the zone has 1,000 properties, and if you want to open it and you want to be able to price, you gotta have at least 50 comps, and then you make all the efforts you can to have at least 50 comps in that zone. Um,
Hmm.
um,
And from the 50 comps, you would create an algorithm that essentially predict what the other ones would be, or how would that work?
so this is actually what connects with the idea of a zone being more homogeneous or more heterogeneous.
Hmm.
Um, More homogeneous zones, you actually need less comps, because you know that if a property comes out, I mean, someone starts selling their property, it is highly likely that any of the comps you have will work for that property, because all of the properties in the zone are exactly the same.
Yeah.
If you go to more heterogeneous areas, you need more comps, and you need comps that are able to cover more type of properties, or a more diverse type of properties. So the amount of data that you need and the complexity of making a price also depends on how homogeneous the city area is.
And just to dumb it down for the listeners, to obviously that never really took basic science, or like they were not really that great. So homogeneous would be something that would be very similar overall, consistent, right?
Exactly.
And heterogeneous is you'll have maybe a house that has, five beds, two baths, and then next to it it's like two beds, one bath, or like the entire construction and the entire and the entire meter space or square footage space is totally different, and things like that. Is that what you mean, or how do
That's
you
exactly what I mean. But you're making it too easy. Imagine you have an apartment complex of 25 square meters apartment, and then next door you have a, a 200 square meters house, which is 40 years old, and then you have a set of apartments built in the 1960s, and the whole zone is developed in different periods of time with different type of properties.
Okay. No, that totally makes sense. In the US, you in the USA right now, you can scrape properties and even find the homeowner information, like homeowner phone number and emails, and you just cold call to potentially do some sort of deal with them, right? Like potentially do go through a understanding, why they're looking to sell, a sales process, and potentially negotiating some sort of terms for the seller, right? In Latin America, I don't think that it's possible unless you, or is that possible? Am I correct there and incorrect?
No, you're right. That's not possible. Like, unless it's listed on the internet, uh, and the seller provided their phone number and email, it's not possible. Um, and also, there's a lot of data protection laws um, in Latin America in place that make it almost impossible for you, just with an address, to get a hold of the owner.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it happens also in Canada. Canada is very like the data is very protective down there, and wholesalers or real estate investors can just really buy a list and start cold calling. They have to ultimately, run paid ads, wait for an opt-in, and ultimately call that person and then investigate, be able to do a throw a discovery call with that homeowner and just understand, what they're asking and so on. And then they're going to be able to potentially come up with comparables and potentially give them an offer to potentially buy that property, right? So the I guess the lead generation and the property acquisition process, did that also help you on uncovering better data, as every single homeowner that would input their information in your piece of technology, then they'll put their information, you guys will call them and investigate. Is that helping, like the lead generation part of it? Does that help in uncovering what the homeowner thinks the property is and the value of the property is? And does that help you at all with the data side, or is that something that's kind of, you know not
I
really
mean,
true information?
it definitely does. And we have actually developed products, free products, to uh, actually like a estimate, but for our markets, it's we're lagging in terms of in estimate. You only insert your address and it will calculate the price. We ask a couple more questions, but what we're basically providing is a service that will allow any customer to calculate for free the value of the property. But of course, we ask for some data in exchange. And we do that I mean, we have replicated that strategy also for the iBuying business. If you want an initial offer, you have to leave us your data, um, because in the end, um, in the end, we need to optimize lead acquisition because, um, as you said, we need all of those leads to actually make the business work, uh, and it is extremely helpful. And in the other hand, we're also developing one of the core values of the company, which is making the market more transparent. I
Mhm.
I think we should never stop doing that. And if we want the market to improve, we need to make sure that it's more transparent and that people is making decisions with the highest quality data available. Um, and that's one of our aims.
Okay. And so can you tell me, part of the core values of your company, of Habi.co, is making the market more transparent, like making obviously the end result of your clients to have more transparent data. But like how, like, can you dive deeper into that? Like how are you guys achieving it, or what is the entire uh process, and what's the goal there, like to making everything more transparent? How are you guys achieving that?
Yep. Well, first you have to divide the market in time in, let's say, players. So you have some players which are institutional players, and then they need a lot of data to make better decisions. So with institutional players, what we try to do is create alliances. Right now, we're trying to make an alliance, or actually working on an alliance with the Central Bank of Colombia, let's say like the Fed of Colombia, and in building a price index based on our data. And we have a strategy for institutional players that need more information to make better decisions. Um, we have a strategy for brokers or people who are inside the real estate business and they kind of know everything, but they don't really have micro data. Um, so what we do with them is a lot of interaction and sharing with them constantly. And of course, building trust with them and making sure that they know that we're not using our data to just to take advantage. And then
Mhm.
there's a strategy for the customer that is making one house transaction every 20 years or every 30 years. They don't know anything about the market. They really don't. So what we're trying to do is build low cost tools that will allow them to just learn a little bit more about the specific transaction that they're trying to make. So we have developed such products such as Habi, where they can learn the price of their house, or products that are very soon to be deployed that will allow them to upload, let's say, the legal history of their house as a document, and we will automatically interpret it for them and make sure that they understand the legal history of their property in a much more interpretable way. So depends on the player, but
Okay. So you have basically different clients. You have clients in the front end, you have clients in the back end with different sub products that you created. So would you consider homeowners one of the users of your products where downloads the history of the property information, where they get some sort of estimate, and are they like users in the front end as well, apart from like everyone that you sell houses to and you make money in the back end? Or how does these front end look like, you delivering value to the homeowner?
yes. So the homeowner has many needs. Uh, First of all, the homeowner might be a seller. If the homeowner is a seller, we have a ton of options for him. We have the iBuyer option. So he can sell to us and we will immediately buy and pay. And just a little note here, Latin American markets are highly liquid in relation to the US. Just as an example, more or less, the mortgage to GDP relation in the US is about 70%. It is 7% in Colombia and 12% in Mexico. So almost
Okay.
5 times less
So
liquid.
if we were to put it in like very simple words, when you say high liquid, is that you can just exit it as fast as possible, or like what do you mean exactly?
Yeah. So whenever you buy a house, it's highly likely that you have invested most of your savings into that house, right? But now your savings are just bricks and woodwork and metal, right? The capability of making those bricks, woodwork, and metal back into money is how liquid your house is, right? Um, in the US, every house is highly liquid because it's very easy to get a mortgage. In Latin America, houses are not liquid because it's very hard to turn them back into money. Every time you have a house, all you have is bricks, woodwork, and metal. You don't really have the money or the availability of money because you own a house. That's what I mean by markets not being liquid. Uh, um, so in that kind of context, a homeowner might need his home to be liquid, and we have the iBuyer option for him. If he really needs it and he needs to sell in 10 days, we'll buy in 10 days. Then we have another option, which is just being an intermediary, in which we help them list the house, and we provide it to our broker network, and our broker network will help the owner sell faster than the average of the market, because our network is probably better. Um, uh, and then we can also help him broker a mortgage. In this product we're working, and it's developing, but we can also help him broker a mortgage. Now, if the homeowner doesn't really need to sell the house, we have some products that will help him gather information about the house. And we were talking about some of these low cost products that will help him get a valuation, understand about the legal history of the house, and all of the things to understand his property. Uh, and that's basically what we're doing for homeowners right now.
Yeah. So obviously, like I actually am very curious about this. In the US and in the US, like people are used to going and see the prices in Zillow, being able to give out information online and things like that. But the culture that Latin America still hasn't created is that being able to find that information or give out that information so freely. Um, and I'm assuming that being able to like just negotiate with the homeowners in Latin America, especially in Colombia and Mexico, like what are the challenges that usually an iBuyer or someone that does the way that you do at scale present with the marketplace? So they present it with homeowners, like talking with them, explaining them, educating them, giving the offer, giving the cash, transacting, like, and then ultimately, making money off these properties. Like, what are those challenges? And if you could give me a rundown, that would be huge to understand, because this, will give the listeners like a great idea of how tough the Latin American market could be compared to like the US.
So the whole process is tough, but starting with the customer, I would say building trust is hard, and getting them to understand that you are not making this deal because you're trying to fool them is hard, because that's the type of context that they have been dealing with historically. So building trust is hard, um, and of course into that comes properly explaining the price of what you're paying. Now, operationally, transacting a house is extremely difficult. Our laws, regulations, and basically the way in which the whole system works makes that making a transaction has a lot of friction and in several steps. You have to go to a notary 5 or 6 times. You have to sign a ton of paperwork. A lot of this cannot be done digitally. You have to do it physically, um, and that brings a lot of friction into the whole process of buying and selling a house. And every time that you need something else to be done, you always face this trust issue in which the customer doesn't know if you are telling him that you have to do this additional uh, thing because you're trying to fool him, or he actually needs to do it. So dealing with the whole process and building trust throughout the whole process is highly difficult. Of course, it's a capital intensive type of business, and raising capital in Latin America is not as easy. We have been lucky that we have great founders and great investors, and we have been lucky we haven't found that barrier in our day-to-day operation. But I mean, finding the funding to run an iBuyer with thousands of properties in your inventory is not easy. But if you figure that out and you're able to price correctly, I think you have a business.
Yeah, 100%. So building trust, obviously, a lot of initial investors that try to do at a very low scale or individual scale for buying houses and locking up properties in a contract so that they can flip it. They actually lack the entire sales process that builds trust, but also the marketing process that builds trust prior to the sales process. So one thing that I've learned from you guys is that you guys position yourself as a big authority by already running very professional ads, running ads that ultimately get attention, but you still have that trust issue. So when you operationally, when you get on the phone with them, I'm assuming that you have a some sort of commercial team, some sort of sales team essentially, that are trained to go through a sales process and ultimately be able to handle all these objections and concerns that people have, right? um I don't know how that looks like, but I love to like have a little bit of understanding. Is we're here, this podcast, we get a lot of people that they thrive by being great marketers and great salespeople, like understanding how to help others by going through a sales process and a framework, sales framework. So ultimately their team is a lot of closers, call it like that, right? So they close on the deals. They get on the phone after the lead is generated. They ultimately understand they connect with the seller. They introduce themselves. They set the proper agenda of how the conversation is going to go, and ultimately understand their current situation, their challenges, a little bit more about the property, finding facts about the property, whether it makes sense for them to buy or pay cash or not, and then ultimately educating them to come up with some sort of offer at the end based on what the sellers needed. How does that work in a iBuyer stage in Latin America? Your your marketing and sales process to ultimately, no, I don't want to say defeat, but ultimately surpass that trust that you guys currently have as an iBuyer.
Yeah. So I mean, you touched a very important point, which is how you as an institution can be trusted just because you are the institution. Um, and a lot of efforts and money has been spent on building that type of institution. I think we have been highly successful in Colombia. When you look at traditional brand indicators, we usually rate very high in the real estate uh, affiliation uh, type of rank, which is great. And that also that of course brings a lot of leads. Now, once a lead is generated, um, we first make an initial pricing and make sure that we're not gonna reject the lead in 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 the late stages of the process because it doesn't fit one of our business requirements. So first we filter all of that and we try to be as transparent as we can with the customer in explaining him why we can't buy the property. But once that's been done and we are able to get an initial pricing on the property, then the sales team starts working on it. And the sales team, this is actually quite interesting because there's always a balance in how much you want to guide the salesperson and how much you want to limit what he can say and how much freedom you give him. Uh, and this is a balance that's hard to manage, especially in something like this where you want to close the deal. You want to make sure that the person trusts you or trusts the salesperson and the company, because in the end, the seller has to trust both of them, the seller and the company. It's not worth it's not worth anything if you trust the company a lot, but then the salesperson does a terrible job. You're not gonna close the deal. Um, so finding that flexibility in terms of how much the seller can say, how much he can be creative in terms of the calls, the conversations to build that trust is hard. We have been going a bit more with the strategy of more flexibility rather than less flexibility. Although, of course, we try to provide as much insights as we can on the property and the customer to the seller so that he can improve his job.
Yeah.
Once he closes the deal, and this is what, let's say, this is a closer in terms of what you were saying. Then the client gets handled to someone who does all of the paperwork and and actually takes by the hand this person stage by stage to make sure that all of the paperwork is done until
Kind of like a
you.
transactional coordinator or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But also this person has to know everything about all the paperwork that needs to be done to transact a property in
Yeah.
Latin America, which
100.
is quite complicated. So once the deal is closed, you handle it to a second person that makes sure that all the steps that need to be done before the money is transferred get done.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
and this is actually a lot more less creative,
Yeah.
not as creative, because you have to follow a step by step until you can actually buy the property.
Right. I mean, you guys have, obviously created everything by like a company that is built by systems, and ultimately you grew by a lot of people now. I believe under you, there are like under 100 or more than that. Is that correct?
Yeah, about 100 people under me.
100 people on you. That's a lot of people. Now, how fast did Habi actually grow from start?
It was quick, and in the first 2 years, it was exponential. Definitely, we've stabilized a little bit in the last year in terms of headcount. We've grown a lot in terms of revenue and market share and all of this, but in terms of headcount, we've stabilized. Um,
How many
and
people? How many people? How many employees do you guys currently have? I seen LinkedIn over 400, but I don't know if that's correct.
in both countries, it's about 1,500.
1,500. Oh wow, that's way more than I saw in LinkedIn.
Yeah, in both countries, and I mean, I'm including every level of the company. Um, Now, the thing here is, the thing here is when when you have solved a lot of problems very manually and in a day-to-day operation, and then you start scaling up, the only way in which you can keep up with the pace is by hiring more people.
Mhm.
And this is where your tech strategy needs to be aligned with the objectives of the company, because you need to make sure that you're aiming for that 10x improvement in terms of technology, but you're also developing the necessary software to improve the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
And again, that's a difficult balance to find, and sometimes you don't find it, and you end up hiring a lot of people just to solve a day-to-day operation. Um, uh, but I mean, eventually you need to find ways to make it more efficient.
So what you're saying is that a real estate investing company. So one of my neighbors actually here in this building, they have one of the biggest real estate investing companies. They started as a wholesale company. Now they started actually acquiring the properties, and they're evolving to where they're fully buying the properties themselves, and then ultimately being a lending company. And they are transforming the way that they see themselves from a real estate investing company to a tech company. So they are saying, I'm a tech enabled company that just so happens to do real estate. And the way that I see it is that it's very similar to what you guys are doing, where you knew that the fastest way to scale was through two leverages: human capital, right? Lots of labor, and code, ultimately technology. Do you see that you feel like companies, when they really want to take it to a next level, they need to insert technology into their agency, into their service, or what's your opinion about that?
I think you need to ask yourself a couple questions. The first question you need to ask yourself is, what do you need technology for? And by this I mean, are you developing technology because you needed to have a transformational product, or are you doing tech just because you need to make some processes more efficient? If the answer is the first, then you definitely need to get into tech, and you definitely need to have your own people thinking about how you can add value to the customers, to your clients, by using and developing new technology. If you're just implementing technology because you need to reduce costs and make some processes more efficient, then you don't necessarily need to hire anyone. Maybe a lot of your issues have already been solved by someone, and you can just hire services. Just make sure that you have a good assessment in that you're hiring the right type of service. We definitely know that we need to build technology to solve the problem. There's no MLS, there's no good products for brokers in Latin America. We need to make sure that we're making the technology for the market, and that's why we have a lot of developers thinking about that. But we also know that there's a lot of processes that we need to make more efficient in a day-to-day basis. Sometimes we hire software as a service companies. Sometimes we develop some of the solutions. Depends on what's more cost efficient. But you need to ask. I mean, I think the big difference between being a tech company and not being a tech company is not the fact of you using tech in your business or not using tech in your business. The difference is whether you're using tech to change the whole business or just to improve an operation.
So, do you think that it cannot be both to improve operations and to ultimately make the business product better?
If you're using tech to improve your operation, you're not a tech company. You're a tech-enabled company, if you want to call yourself that. I mean, tech is not your business. If you are using tech to change the state of the game, you are a tech company.
Huge difference there. So with everything coming with AI technologies and everything, are you guys getting into AI, new algorithms, or just AI itself, artificial intelligence, with to help your customers?
The simple answer is yes. This is a hard question because first you have to define AI. If you go to the basic dictionary definition of AI, if a machine is making a decision for you, then you're doing AI. Basically, if you have an Excel that says, if this number is greater than 3, then say yes. If this number is smaller than 3, then say no. You're doing AI. Now, of course, this has evolved a lot into more complex algorithms that are amazing. Machine learning is, I would say, some sort of AI, subgroup of AI. We use a lot of machine learning in our algorithms, mainly pricing algorithms. So definitely we are. And now we're starting to look into, I know there's this huge boom about how to use AI chats into improving the experience of customers. We're starting to look into that and exploring how people can probably find houses using natural language instead of trying to classify with very structured information, but more with natural language. And we started to look into that as well.
What do you mean natural language? To like speak with the bot, basically?
Yeah, basically, if I ask you what type of property you're looking for, you can just tell me, and we're able to figure out which property to offer you based on what you just told me, instead of making you feel 30 filters in a website so that I can find the properties
Yeah.
that are good for you.
Man, I feel like speaking with you, it's like another high level conversation where it's like there you're just so you seem like so smart, man. Like I have to break down everything that you have to tell me. Like literally, like I'm an engineer graduated, but like I feel like the level where you are in terms of like the technical way of speaking, it's like just so much superior. I love it, but like we need to make sure that the listeners that are not as smart as you are able
I'm
to
sure they
really.
are. I'm just a poser.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, like there's a lot of smart people that are listening to this. 100%. And that's why we're bringing people like you here to really talk about this. However, there's a lot of people that are willing to, for example, see an opportunity. If you, for example, I don't know, do you buy houses from real estate investors or real estate wholesalers in Latin America, or you also only buy from homeowners?
We don't, but not because we don't want to, because there's not really that type of businesses in Latin America.
Mm.
I've spoken with some people that have managed some of these funds in the US and live in Latin America, and I asked them, why aren't there any? The main reason is the high complexity in managing the inventory or what they have. So multifamilies is something that's starting to erase every time more and more and more and more, and we're starting to see more and more multifamilies. Investors that buy a whole block, they develop a building and then they rent, but they just want to have that building. They don't want to have 2,000 houses in different locations, renting them separately, because there's a lot of logistical challenges to that. And also the law is highly protective of home renters. So people are a bit afraid of doing that.
What challenges have you presented? The law that protects renters. How do they protect it, and how does that affect you?
Well, that doesn't really affect us right now because we sell the houses, we don't rent them,
Mhm.
and when we sell them, it's not like we have rented them before. We just flip them as fast as we can. That improves our yearly ROE, and that's kind of the aim of all this. So we don't rent them. We don't have that issue. But I can tell you a little personal experience. My mom rented a house which she owned, and it turned out that the renter just stopped paying and he didn't want to live.
Mm.
We spent 2.5 years without receiving 1 cent of rent before
Wow.
we could actually take out this guy out of the house.
Like you
Um,
couldn't, yeah, you couldn't kick them out. You couldn't do an eviction.
I mean, I'm telling you a horror story. It's not how it goes 100% of the time, but this is definitely one risk that you are facing when you are renting houses in Latin America.
That makes sense. So you can go up to 2 years to without any income, and you're basically paying mortgage if you're paying mortgage, and nothing is happening. Wow.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah. So good thing is that you guys are paying cash essentially, right?
yeah,
Is there any instance where you guys are also ultimately doing a some sort of seller finance negotiation with the homeowners, or that doesn't happen?
that's not really happening. We have one way of purchasing houses in Mexico in which, in order to avoid the double transaction ability of the property, because of course there's taxes on each transaction that you make, we have some interesting uh, ways of working around that, which kind of look like what you were telling me. But no, we are actually just paying the seller whatever the price agreed upon. We pay him, then we hold the property, and then we sell it, and then to the buyer we help him get the financing he needs from banks, but then we also try to get the money back as fast as we can.
Okay. So you would also try to get individual buyers after flipping the property, or because I heard earlier that you also have institutional buyers, right? So very sophisticated buyers, institutional buyers that will be your customers, and ultimately could be hedge funds or things like that. That will be your clients.
They are our clients, but they're not our clients because we're selling houses to them. As I said, there are not huge hedge funds in Latin America buying properties by the bulk. I mean, we would love if there were, because I know that some of the biggest iBuyers in the US sell a lot of their properties to hedge funds. That doesn't really happen in Latin America, so we basically sell all of our houses individually. I
Mm-hmm.
think our our relationship with institutions as customers is not a relationship of we selling them properties, but a relationship of how we can provide information to them uh, in order for them to make better decisions. And it's a different sort of relationship, not of dealing houses, but more of uh, exchanging data, information, insights, so that we can make the market better.
Yeah. I'm thinking that I'm sure there is a lot of flippers in Latin America and Colombia and Mexico, people that do flips for a living and everything, and are attempting to do something in a high scale level. Not sure if some of them are using technology for the whole purpose, but why do you feel like Habi has been able to scale in just 2 years or less than 3 years to from zero people to 1,500 people overall? Like, what is that slight edge that Habi has that started the beginning that allowed that huge scale?
Well, first, we have been able to get the capital that is needed to make this scalable. And that has been a huge work by our founders, our CEO, Breen. She's amazing doing that. Now our CFO is also amazing doing it. So raising the capital has been a huge part of it. If you want to scale a business like this, you need the capital. Um, I think, and this is just bragging, but that we have actually done a great job in making pricing scalable. You cannot make this pricing scalable, if this business is scalable, if you're not able to price almost every property that 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 is being sold, um, because in the end, conversion rates are not amazing. And the reason for this is that the cost of making a dual transaction, first purchasing, then selling, is high. So then the discount that you have to apply to the seller is high. So this is a luxury product. And what I mean by luxury product is that, I mean, you don't have to be rich to have it. But you have to, quote unquote, be able to lose a lot of value on your home to afford the product of iBuying. So conversion is not great. If you really want to make this business big, you need to be able to handle thousands of customers on a month and thousands of home sellers, and provide the best service that you can to each of them. So making pricing scalable and data uh, has been a huge part of it. Um, and finally, I think our operations team is amazing. Uh, Operating thousands and thousands of transactions and paperwork with hundreds of customers and institutions and notaries and all of that is not easy.
Yeah.
And that's been also a big part of it.
How many transactions, how many properties you guys transact in a monthly basis?
Both countries, both purchases and sales. I think we're close to 1,000 a month.
1,000 properties between Mexico and Colombia. Okay. So the Colombian team is mostly in Bogota, or are they like a remote team or something like that? How does that work?
Most of the team is in Bogota, but we have also operations in Medellin, Cali, Barranquilla, and Bucaramanga. And those cities have also some teams in them to make sure that we can buy and sell. Mexico has most of the team in Mexico City, but again, we also have operations in Guadalajara, Monterrey, and very soon Querétaro.
Okay. And why choosing Colombia and why choosing Mexico? I know one of the co-founders, he's from Bogota, right? But I mean, why Mexico at the end of the day?
So Colombia is where the company's from, and I mean where the founders are from. I know one of the founders is American, but her husband's Colombian. She moved to Colombia, so it was natural for the business to start in Colombia.
Yeah.
Then once we realized we had a scalable business that worked in our markets, I think we asked ourselves two questions. I mean, opening a country is never easy, and nothing is really 100% replicable. So which country is big enough and has a market that is big enough for you to make all of that effort? You know, second to Brazil, Mexico is the biggest country in Latin America, both in population and, of course, in number of houses. So Mexico was up there, and then the other question is, where does it make sense to install your product?
Mhm.
And we realized Mexico was a lot closer culturally to Colombia than, let's say, Brazil.
Mhm.
So huge market, relative cultural closeness, just made sense. It was the safest bet. Of course, it's a huge one, no, but it was the safest bet.
That makes sense. And are you guys preparing to first dominate and master those countries, or is there like a plan to expand over to other countries?
I mean, you never really know, and things can change. Um, but I think right now we want to. I mean, we're more trying to get a higher share of the markets that we're already in, and also um, developing two other products besides the iBuyer. I briefly talked about them. Inmobiliaria, where we basically brokerage the transaction between a seller and a buyer without us actually buying the property, and Habi Credit, in which we're helping buyers um, get mortgages for whichever property they want to acquire.
Mm.
So I think the bet right now is making sure that all of those products get higher market share in Colombia and Mexico.
So those two products that you guys are creating, I mean, first of all, you guys are amazing. You guys are amazing, doing amazing stuff. But did you see like there was a trend and solve also those two other problems, or is it that you, based on the solution that you have created, there's also those other problems that you can help and create products or sub products like Immobiliaria and Happy Credit? Like what is it that made you go and start creating products around those things?
I think it's a bit of both. So I think we would never be the type of company that will come up with something that is completely unrelated with all of the technological basis that we have developed. So we know that a big part of our added value and value prop is based on the technology and data that we have built. Um, so making sure that all of our product releases take advantage of this is, I would say, a must for us, because that's where our real value is. But secondly, we realized, as I was saying, that the iBuying product is expensive. If you wanna use the iBuying product, you're gonna have to pay a lot of money in terms of the value of your house. So we wanted to make sure that we develop products that also help solve the main structural issues of the market, which are liquidity, trust, and transparency. So if we solve all of these products, are aiming to solve at least one of those pillars. Avi Credit, it's a highly liquidity type of product, and Inmobiliaria is trying to build the same amount of trust as the iBuyer business does, without having to buy the property. So I would say we always make sure that our products are based on the things that we have built that add the most value.
Mhm.
And in the same time, we make sure that our products somehow are fixing some of the main issues that we have found on markets:
Right.
liquidity, trust, and transparency.
Liquidity, trust, and transparency. So ultimately, whenever you create tech companies or tech products, you want to ultimately eliminate as many deficiencies that happen in the marketplace. And I would say that one of the biggest deficiencies that you guys have in Latin America is, like you said, liquidity, and that would be kind of like that would be something that Credit Habi would solve. Is that correct?
Correct. Because right now it is very hard for people to get the funding for purchasing houses. We want to make sure that people can fund their houses.
Okay. So basically, you would act as a private money lender, or like would you act like partner up with like banks and things like that in order to get them to get into a mortgage?
Well, of course, in the future, you never know how it's going to look. Right now, we're brokering,
Mhm.
and we're helping the customer get the best bank for them. But we're also helping the bank understand the property way better than they ever could. Because one of the main reasons why banks don't like lending for used homes in Latin America is because they don't really understand the properties, and
Yep.
they've never made a huge effort, and there's no MLS. So we're also trying to help the bank make sure that the property that they're funding is safe, and there's a market for it, and which is the right price, and all of this information that the bank kind of wants and needs in order to make the decision. So we're
Yeah.
brokering, we're customer facing, but we're also providing the real lenders, I mean big lenders, all of the information that they need to be able to do it.
I feel like one of your core values is transparency in the real estate marketplace, but also that's part of your mission, right? What's your mission statement as a company as a whole?
Help Latin American families with the most important financial decision and transaction of their lives.
Okay.
That's it.
All right. And so you see yourself ultimately helping thousands of families, if not millions of families, doing so with technology. How would Inmobiliaria, it would be Inmobiliaria.co or
Habi Inmobiliaria.
Havi Inmobiliaria? Okay. How would that help with that mission?
Mainly with trust. As I said, this is we're dealing with a market that has hundreds of brokers. I mean, thousands of brokers. Um, sellers and buyers. And just let me describe a little situation, an example for you.
Hmm.
Let's say I'm a home buyer in Colombia, and I start looking for homes, and then I find a broker. I don't really know. He's not listed anywhere. It's not like I can go check if he's a registered broker, just a regular broker, which most of them are not registered anywhere. And he
Hmm.
tells me, I know this guy who's selling a property 2 blocks from here. Let's go visit it. And let's say I'm a risk taker and I'm not afraid. And I say, okay, let's go check it out. Then I go and I see that the house, it's also not listed. There's only a window listing. The guy has in his window a phone number saying this house is for sale. Call me. That's everything I know. There's no MLS where I can check that it was officially listed anywhere. It's just there. And I see that the house has a lot of like quick fixes. It has some painting in this wall, some painting in that wall. Um, uh, and then I say, okay, I'll buy it just because I want to buy it. And then I I don't know who this I don't know how to do a transaction because it's fairly likely that I've never bought a house in my life. Most Latin Americans have never bought a house in their lives. So I don't know how to do it, and who's gonna help me do this? Maybe a cousin of mine that once did, and I call him. Do you really have to go to the notary and do this, do that? So it's a very complicated, you know where I'm going with this. It's a very
Hmm.
complicated process where there's absolutely no trust between the agents, and there's nobody who acts as a trust keeper. uh, so Avi Inmobiliaria should make Avi the institution that makes both brokers, sellers, I mean, all brokers, sellers, and buyers have an intermediary that they can trust, and that they can talk to, and that they can ask for help if something goes wrong. Um, Building that trust in the market, I think, is the big bet of our immobiliary.
Yeah. Uh, Guys, like I feel like you guys are currently evaluated by a huge amount right now with that. Like everything you guys have done in such a short a period of time. It's crazy. Like there's no I don't think there is any other company out there, or do you guys have any other people or companies that currently do something similar to Habi out there, or are you guys the only ones playing this game?
Um, so it depends on whether you include Brazil or not. Um, Brazil has a couple huge prop tech companies. Quinto Andar is one of them. Loft is another one of them. Um, so if you include Brazil, these guys are doing it. In the rest of Spanish-speaking LATAM, there are some players. Clicalia, which is a Spanish firm, they have some business in Mexico. Um, Flat, but I think, I mean, I know none of them is as big as we are, and and they're not as big as we are.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, you guys are very well present in the Latin American space in the technology prop tech space. We have actually your co-founders. We have a few just friends in common in the prop tech. I was able to like be part of the like network with a lot of prop tech entrepreneurs that have been highly invested by a few Shark Tanks in both in Colombia and Shark Tanks in the US. And that's how kind of like we've been able to relate to each other. Um, but I really would love to know, like, you being one part of the founding member, right? Like, how many people were they when they first did their first hire? In that they were like, "This is the founding member." this is the team that is going to take this company to the next level and ultimately make the real estate market transparent, and we're going to be build great things. How many people were there at the beginning? Um, was your position always as a vice president? Like how was that as starting out in your end?
I'd say we were about 10 people, 10 core people in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I was not vice president in the beginning. And I think none of us were. Um, because I think challenges develop as the company develops. And challenges change, and some get harder, others are no longer challenges. And and the skills that the founding team has might be great for the founding moment, that doesn't really transfer. I mean, that doesn't necessarily transfer to when you're a huge company.
Yeah.
And all of the founding team is amazing and is great. And I mean, probably the most important and talented people that I've ever worked with. But it's been a challenge for me to adapt, a huge challenge to adapt to what is needed now in terms of what was needed back then.
Yeah.
So I don't know if
No, I get it. Usually the founding members are kind of like the golden babies. A golden baby will ultimately, grow in a golden era where like you guys are very few and you got everything is so exciting from the very beginning, and you guys are given part of the family. Like you guys are part of the family. You guys are given even part of the company. That's what I've seen. And ultimately, these golden babies grow to have their own teams. Like right now, you have under 100 people, right? And I'm not sure if you ever like kind of imagine yourself managing or leading 100 people in the past. Um, like, how is that transformation for you, man? As a founding member, someone that started the first 10 in the tech company, and like yeah, like did you see yourself growing and being part of a company like this before?
I mean, I did see myself solving hard problems and facing them and making sure that I was doing my best to solve them. Um, of course, I never planned like I wanna lead 100 people, or wanna lead 1,000 people, or I wanna lead 10 people. I didn't really think about it. In the end, what you aim to have is the resources, and by resources I don't mean people. I mean everything beside added to people. But what you need to have is build the necessary resources to solve the size of the problem that you have to solve. And if you need 20 people to solve that problem, then you are managing the right amount of people. If you need 2,000 people, then you're managing the right amount of people. What I think is wrong is you putting yourself in a position of, I just want to manage more people. The amount of people you manage and the type of people that you manage, in the end, uh, should be related to the type of problem that you're solving and the size of the problem that you're solving. Um, uh, and you have to adapt, and you have to do that. And some people are great for solving very specific problems with small teams of 5 and 6 people, and they're extremely successful doing that. Other people are better at handling big teams without getting as involved in the specific solution.
Yeah.
And I think all of that is valuable in a company. All of those skills.
I love it. And one of the biggest things that I see here is that you guys went from 1,500 from you guys went from 0 to 1,500 people right now. both countries. And the first 10 usually have a, like you said, it goes by levels, a specific mission that at that moment you guys needed to solve. So what was the first MVP? What was the first goal that the founding team needed to actually solve and create in order to start generating revenue, in order to start, getting to be seen by investors and so on? What was the first MVP?
We needed to build a process in a very, very small area of Bogota. Actually, the neighborhood was called Suba, is called Suba. We needed to prove that we could build a process in which you could buy and sell a house in less than 4 months. One or two houses. We weren't aiming for hundreds. We were aiming for, but the important thing to prove is that there was a process that worked, and that's what we needed to do.
Okay. So you guys proved that you guys were doing like one, two houses. How fast did you guys prove that? Was it the first 4 months? So the first 4 months of buying and closing on a house and selling a house, how many properties do you guys lock up before saying, okay, it's time to put a lot of capital in scaling?
I don't really recall the timeline, but I remember a lot of conversations about how fast those first two houses were selling, and we were suffering each day to make sure that those houses actually sold. We had a pretty good seed round, so I'll have to go check in the numbers, but I'd say we scaled from 2 to, let's say, 10 houses in the first 4 or 5 months, and then the pandemic hit in March 2020. So it's actually a good timeline. We bought our first two houses in November 2019. We scaled up to more or less 10 houses a month before March 2020. Then April and May, we were absolutely frightened. We didn't know what to do, so we stopped. We just dedicated ourselves to improve the process. And then once we saw that the market in the US and then in Europe wasn't so bad, we started buying again with a much more robust process that we had developed thanks to the first 10 or 15 houses we had bought and sold. And from then we really scaled. I would say June, July 2020, 7 months after we started the company, we really started scaling it.
Okay. I mean, obviously to you, like that's something that happened. But just to a normal person, a regular person that has never really imagined that first you can get capital by investors in order to like scale into human capital, into labor and a lot of software. So you guys noticed that there was a process. 10 houses were able to be purchased and sold, purchased, rehabbed, and sold, right? So you did a flip. No matter how long were you guys already using the capital from investors and already developing like a high accelerated just the tech piece? Because in my head it means it happened in less than 6 months or in a year or something, because it's crazy to think that you guys went from in 2 years over 500 people, even 500 people, right? It's crazy to think for me. So how was it inside? I'm pretty sure it was like a huge conundrum or happening inside the office where you guys had to like expand and like grow and grow, more people, more hires, more interviews. Like, how was that?
Yeah, I mean, there's this. I'm not 100%. I don't agree with 100% with what I'm about to say, but it's a little bit how it felt. If you feel that everything is under control, you're not going fast enough. Uh, and that's a little bit how it was. We never had everything under control, and we made some bets. Some of them, of course, always calculated bets. We knew that if the bet wouldn't pay back, it's not like the company was going to get broke. So always calculated bets, but we made a lot of bets that we just didn't had control over, and testing and making those bets and learning from them. Just make those bets. Make sure that you're not gonna go out of business because you lost that bet. But you don't have to be 100% under control of everything 100% of the time. Because if you are, you probably won't scale as fast.
Okay. I think that's something that a lot of just founders and company owners, entrepreneurs say that people don't even comprehend. Like there needs to be some sort of crazy thing happening inside of your head on your company and some sort of desire that is crazy, that is not normal, in order to achieve great things, right? So you being part of the co-founding team, um, like ultimately made you essentially part owner of the company, right? Essentially made you like the golden baby, right? So at some point, did you also share the same values as the co-founders, like that same craziness, passion, obsession about making sure that needs to happen, that we need to get to that goal? I'm really curious to see what's in the head of a founding team
Yeah.
member.
So first of all, I'm gonna start calling myself the golden baby from now on every meeting that I go on. I'm the golden baby.
The golden baby.
No, I mean, you definitely have to share the values. It is impossible to do all of the things that you're asked to do and that you force yourself to do if you don't share the values of the company. Uh, if you don't, you will probably just be miserable, and you'll just be in the company because you want to exit at some point. And you have to share the core values. And luckily for me, one of the core values of the company is full transparency inside the company and being able to have the hard conversations with anyone you want. So whenever I disagreed on something, I could go to the founders and tell them, like, I think what we're doing is wrong because X, Y, and Z. Uh, uh, and that has given me, as a part of the founding team, but not being the co-founder, uh, the ability of always making sure that my ideas are heard and that they matter. It doesn't mean that they're always going to get done, of course, of course, but at least you have to agree in the fundamentals, because you might disagree on how the solution is being applied, but you have to agree on the reason why you're doing something. I mean, I'm going to be extremely, this is going to be a very extreme example, but if you're a highly moral person and your boss is asking you to do this because this is the way in which you're going to steal someone, then you're just not going to do it. It's very different if you agree on what you're trying to do and disagree on how you have to do it. So I've had a lot of disagreements on how things should be done, but I have never really had a profound disagreement on why things should be done. And being aligned on the why is of the utmost importance.
I love that. Being aligned of the why, but being able to disagree with the how. Okay, that's huge. All right, has been so far an awesome podcast episode that a lot of people have definitely learned who you are, but like Habi had to learn also who have learned who Habi is. So what's next for the company? So we got Habi Inmobiliaria, which is basically Habi Real Estate. Um, we got Habi Credit, so helping people be more liquid. Uh, what else is there? Like, do you feel that at some point you will truly achieve being an MLS and truly achieve being a Zillow, where people have fully easy access to pricing, to easy access to information, data? Is that something that you guys see happening in next 2 3 years? Like, what's next?
I mean, yes, I think we're gonna be able to achieve that. Um, and I think what we need to become is being the strongest player in credit, in inmobiliaria, and in iBuying in our markets. But we need to also become the platform on which all of the other players want to be on in order to deploy their businesses. As I said, a lot of most of the prop techs in the US are based on having access to the MLS, and they build all of their businesses based on that data and that technology. Um, so we want to be extremely strong in mortgage origination, in in brokering transactions, and being a direct part of the transaction in terms of buying and selling. But we also want to become the platform that every player in the game wants to work with in order to develop their own business.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we really need to become. Um, so yeah, we want to be the silo, we want to be the MLS, and we're definitely working towards that.
That's a huge mission there. That's a huge goal. I believe you guys, with the things that you guys have done, will be able to achieve it. But which players do you think that could be fitting with your business? Are you talking about not only real estate agents, maybe regular homeowners, um, I guess lenders or something? What other players are you? Would you feel like would get a lot of value from Happy?
Again, as I said, you never know. People come up with ideas all the time, but just based on the conversation we've had, I've never talked about Abby being a part of the doing anything in the side of renting. So, but we're still collecting that data. We're still understanding how the market works, and if someone wants to have all of the information on properties being rented, I mean, they could talk to us, and maybe we can provide some sort of service, and they can be connected to our platform and to our data and to our services, so they can develop whatever they want on the renting service. You talked about hedge funds in this podcast. Um, if at any point in time hedge funds are interested in investing in Latin America, I think probably buying from us makes a lot of sense. I think probably buying with our data makes a lot of sense. Uh, Even if there are hedge funds which their goal is to develop the houses that you're going to rent, it would also make a lot of sense to partner with us.
Mhm.
And you can go on and on.
No, yeah, 100%. I think that Colombia has a really strong market. Like Mexico also has a strong market. You guys obviously are, playing in a market that is always growing at the end of the day. Now, I know a few people that potentially, I mean, they are very well network connected, and they're creating prop tech companies that allow. I'm just going to give you an example. They are doing property acquisitions, and every single property that is acquired, they would put it inside of their app, right? So think about like an app that is quickly accessible for any person that passes all regulations and policies. and they can invest into each property at minimum $100 in order to essentially fund that property, right, and get some funding on that property, and ultimately they invest into real estate with a minimum $100, and they would get some sort of interest rate on a certain amount of time. With those companies, would you sell properties to those companies? Would you ultimately transact with people like that, like a company that ultimately needs some sort of big portfolio in order to make money on the lending side and so on?
Of
Is that
course. I mean, definitely. If they want to purchase properties from Habi with that scheme of funding, we have definitely no problem with that. Actually, we've done something similar in Colombia, but with debt. Um, so we did some crowdfunding for debt, so that we could purchase apartments as a way to allow people to invest in real estate without having to pay the full ticket. We did this um, with the Bolsa de Valores of Bogota,
Mhm.
and that was highly successful. I mean, there are some restrictions on crowdfunding and crowd lending in Colombia that didn't allow us to scale that as fast and as big as we wanted it. We would have wanted it to scale, but we we definitely think that making investing in properties more democratic is definitely something good for the market.
Oh yeah, 100%. So I'll be happy to, if there's players that get to reach out to me on the game, or I can get to connect, I'll be happy to connect with you, or whoever it is that is a business development manager, whatever. Are you playing business development manager sometimes? Being able to find potential players
Definitely all the time,
all the
all the
time.
time.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. Luckily enough, I've been able to be very well networked so far. And love having you here, man. I think that people get a lot of value from this. People that want to either be in the tech company, in the tech game, tech entrepreneurship, people that want to get into real estate, invest into real estate, whether passively or actively, they get a lot of value from these type of conversations. Um, really would love to know, like, how can people ultimately find out more about you or communicate with your company? Like, how can people get to know you more?
So yeah, I mean, one advantage of my last name combination with my name is that it's quite unique. So if you want to reach out to me, just look for Juan Sokoloff either in LinkedIn or Twitter. I don't have any other social media, so you can just text me. I'm easy to find. Uh, I don't know anybody else who has my name.
All right, yeah, Juan Sokolov, that is like very, very unique. All right, I'm gonna add you in Twitter and on LinkedIn, that's for sure. um And if we ever get to have, if I ever go to Bogota, I have a lot of tech property owners that I network with a lot. Let's grab some dinner or something like that. That will be great. Um, if you're open to do it, and being able to get to know each other better. But I think this was a great podcast, man. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time. I know it's late down there. It's late here too, but uh, anything that maybe you want to share with the listeners or with the audience here, uh, for those that anything that you want to share.
I mean, first of all, thanks a lot, Esteban. Just a little note on your invite. I'm based in Mexico City, so let me know whenever you come to Mexico City, and of course, we can grab dinner anytime. I mean, to the listeners, it's been a long show. I hope you enjoyed it, and I said a couple interesting things for you. Pardon my pronunciation in some words. I know my English is a bit rusty. Uh, and please feel free to reach me if you have any questions about Habi, about our business in either Colombia or Mexico. I'll make sure to answer and to redirect if necessary to anybody in the company that makes part of the company.
No, I think your English is pretty good, man. We hire a lot of people from remote Latinos, and we have to go out of our way in order to learn the language. There's no second language; it's only Spanish. So the fact that you speak really well, tells me that you put the extra effort to learn in school or whatever, travels or like live somewhere else. But I love it, man. Thank you so much for being in this podcast. Again, if anyone got any value in this podcast, I'd love for you to take 60 seconds to give it a review. If you liked it, then give us a 5-star. If you're giving us a 4-star, tell us why. But thank you for being again in this part of this podcast. We're gonna go here and the broadcast and the podcast right now. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juan, for ultimately being part of the podcast, my man. Okay.
Thank you very much, Esteban.
All right.
I'm hustling.